Hello, friends, and welcome back to Stories About Entitled People. Wait, she's complaining that you had to go get someone else to help her? And that you couldn't help her yourself because you were taking care of your baby in the playpen? But she's the one who asked for someone else? But before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to our channel if you're new here and turn on notifications so you don't miss a new video every single day. Here we go. Karen is mad I have my baby in my place of work. This happened in 2016, but is a favorite story of mine. My paternal grandparents own a custom frame store that also sells giftware, jewelry, and needlework supplies. At this time, their store was quite large. I'll explain a bit of the layout to help the story. There was the front and the back separated by a wall with a door. Both were huge rooms. In the front was, of course, all the merchandise, and the back was where my grandfather did the framing. In the front, there was a giant counter. The middle had the till, and on each side were huge counters where customers would pick stuff for their pictures. It was spacious behind that counter. On to the story. My daughter was maybe a month old when my grandmother called me asking if I would be able to help her for a day. She had a craft show she was going to and needed to pack a bunch of giftware, but she was being dragged away by errands that had popped up. She already had everything set aside on one of the side counters. All I had to do was pack them up safe. I wouldn't have to deal with any customers or other store stuff, just packing giftware. No heavy lifting, and I could bring my daughter. Of course, I say yes since I love helping at the store. I want to note here that I don't get paid to do this. I do it because I want to help. The next morning, I get to the store, and my grandma shows me everything she needs packed and takes off to her errands. I begin packing while my daughter sleeps in her playpen off to the side of the counter with the giftware. A couple hours later, an elder Karen comes in and begins to look around. I keep an eye on her. A lot of elderly ladies steal, but don't notify my grandfather right away in the back because sometimes people look and go. This one, unfortunately, did not and instead came to the counter. Elder Karen, EK. Hello, is Catherine, Grandma, here? Me. No, unfortunately, she's out of the store at the moment. However, Kevin, grandfather, is in the back. I can get him for you. EK looks annoyed and nods. I go to the back and let my grandfather know there's a customer. He comes out and I go back to packing. A few minutes after, my daughter starts fussing. I had changed her recently and I knew that cry. She was hungry. I quickly grab a bottle from my little black cooler, pop it in her mouth, and off to sleep she goes while drinking. She was crying for maybe 30 seconds. I give her a little cheek rub and go back to packing. This is when Karen became Karen. EK. You know, you're really lucky that you have such nice bosses. They allow you to bring your child to work. Though you and I both know she should be in daycare and you should be focusing on your job. Your baby's a distraction to your work. You couldn't even help me without getting someone else to do it. Me. Oh, I don't actually work here. I'm just here helping with wrapping giftware for the craft show. My grandparents own the store. Kevin's my grandfather and Catherine is my grandma. I'm their granddaughter and this is their great-granddaughter. EK looks to my grandfather in disbelief, which I get because he immigrated from Hong Kong, married my grandma, and adopted my dad, who are both white as hell. My grandfather then looks back at me with the look of, you know I hate dealing with these people. All I could do was shrug like, sorry, not my fault. Grandma didn't warn us about this one. Then, because the silence was getting awkward, I blurted, yeah, my grandma Catherine was super excited when she found out I'd be bringing her today. EK. Oh. She then goes back to her transaction with my grandfather. I think she was picking up something on hold, and then she leaves. My grandfather shakes his head and goes back to framing. I finished packing. I later told my grandma what happened, and she laughed. And our second story. Aunt wants Grandma's island for free. The cast. Grandma, CB1, my aunt, CB2, my uncle, my mom. Also, this is a very long story, but I'll try to keep it short. So basically, my grandmother had a pretty big piece of land on a small island close to where we all live. She was given it by her parents after they passed away, so she's had it for almost 50 years. On this piece of land, we had 4 houses, one for G, the biggest house, one for CB2, slightly smaller but still big since he was the oldest sibling, one even slightly smaller for CB1, and the smallest for my mom since she was the youngest. A few years ago, CB1 wanted to rebuild her house since it was getting kind of old and she thought it was too small for her, her husband, and their 3 kids. After a lot of discussion, everyone agreed that she would be able to build a new house, but only if my mom could change house with Grandma, since she was now a widow and couldn't take care of her house, and our smaller would fit her much better. Just to clarify, this would mean that the youngest sibling now would have the biggest house on the land. But everyone was okay with it, and CB1 started to build her new house. The first time we went out there, after she had built it, we were all pretty shook since it was a lot bigger and taller than she had first said, and now blocked some of the ocean view for the rest of the houses. It was also in a completely different style than the other houses and didn't really fit in. But it was already built and not much that we could do about it. So about a year or so later, we started talking about my mom taking over Grandma's house when all of a sudden CB1 no longer is okay with M taking over the house just for free. Everyone meets up, and after a lot of fighting, they agree that my mom will take over Grandma's house, but that she'll have to pay roughly $30,000 for it. Fast forward another year, and my mom still hasn't taken over the house, and it starts to come up for discussion again. When CB1 says that she no longer feels comfortable with this deal that she came up with in the first place, this leads to more fighting, and eventually Grandma brings up that maybe one of the kids just should buy the whole place instead, since she now is starting to get too old to care for it anymore. Here's where the real CB story starts. It's a lot of talk about if my mom or CB1 should buy it, since CB2 doesn't really have enough money to buy it, and my mom doesn't really mind either. So they decide that CB1 will buy it and start discussing the price. Now, the whole place is actually worth about $750,000. But of course, CB1 doesn't want to pay that much since she just built a new house for roughly $100,000. So eventually, Grandma says that she can buy it for $500,000, which is incredibly cheap for the place. CB1 then starts complaining that Grandma is mean and that she should just give the place to CB1 because she deserves it. Grandma says that she can't do that because it wouldn't be fair to my mom and CB2, the other siblings. Then my mom steps in and says that she would be okay to pay that price for the place, and this would also mean that Grandma could still come and visit that place and spend time there, whereas CB1 at this point had said to Grandma is dead to her and a terrible mother and everything else that could possibly be the worst thing ever to say to your mom. CB1 goes nuts and claims that my mom is just doing this to be mean and that she doesn't deserve to have that place, and how she and CB2 have gone around to everyone they know that lives close to there how bad of a person my mom is, and to try and get everyone to talk Grandma out of selling the place to my mom. They continue to fight like crazy, and eventually Grandma caves. She's at this point 85 years old and so tired of all this fighting, and agrees to sell the place to CB1 for $450,000. But she also says that she'll give $100,000 to each child, so she really buys it for $350,000. I really wish this story had a better ending. This tore our whole family apart, and it really, really sucked. And our last story. Entitled mom gets herself arrested, followed by even more entitled dad. So I'm under my buddy's car in the driveway. It's a 1973 Olds with a 4-speed, and we're replacing the clutch. We're shade tree mechanics, at best, but this car takes me back, so I agree to help him. He buys good beer. We're inefficient, dirty, and a little bit frustrated. We might possibly have had a few of those beers. Anyway, we're trying to muscle the tranny back in place. A kid of about 8 or so bends over and without preamble, launches into his pitch for some overpriced popcorn he's selling for whatever kid cause he was selling it for. I said that we were a little busy at the moment and he'd have to come back later when I wasn't actually under a car. Entitled mom chimes in and observes that we seem to have time to drink up a case of beer. Why can't we take 5 minutes and buy some popcorn? I literally have a 75-pound Muncie transmission on my chest as we're trying for the 10th time to slide it into place. Lady, I don't even like popcorn, I tell her. Now thank you and have a nice day. But it's for the children, she says. He don't like kids either, my buddy says. I love this guy. EM won't take no for an answer. I lose what little patience I have left after transmission wrestling for the last 10 minutes. From my position laying on my back under the car, I finally holler at her, "Lady, get off my property and take your kid with you. Now." Wait, did we just finally? Yes, the transmission finally lined up and slid into place. Just as we're about to begin getting the bolt started, EM launches into a foul-mouthed tirade. I shift my position a bit and one of my feet brushes against EK. He didn't fall or anything, but he did step back, and in doing so, tripped over one of the tools we had scattered around and landed on his butt. EM goes back crap and starts kicking me in the legs. I'm not sure whether to crawl further under the car or try to get out, but fortunately my buddy got out from the other side and intervened, but by then the EK had joined in. My buddy basically crowded them away from me, and I got out from under the car furious. They retreat to the street, and I pick up the phone and called it in. I have a next-door neighbor who saw the whole thing as well. EM and EK actually approached them for a quick pitch and then continued around the cul-de-sac. Police arrive, we tell them what happened, as does the next-door neighbor. Cops house the lady up, she goes back crap on him, calls her hubby, and after 5 minutes he shows up. By then she's in cuffs, EK's in tears, and entitled dad starts yelling. Oh, mercy, he was a few beers into his afternoon too. Too many to be driving, apparently. Fun times had by all. We finally did get that Olds put back together. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.